Hello students, happy Earth Day. Today we're going to talk about the history of Earth Day and how that relates to us and how we can honor our Earth every single day. This was the first photograph taken of planet Earth. Have you ever seen it? The crew of the Apollo 17 spacecraft took this picture when they were 18,000 miles away from the Earth on their way to the moon. This is the most reproduced picture in the history of people on the planet. And a lot of folks think that this photo gave rise to the environmental movement because it really showed us how we all are here on this planet together. So the environmental movement began in the 1960s, and they were dealing with a lot of the same problems that we deal with today. They were hoping for clean air, pure water, and healthy land. The first Earth Day was on April 22nd, 1970, where 2 million people attended inaugural events at tens of thousands of sites, including schools and universities and community sites across the United States. Why was Earth Day a thing? Why did they have Earth Day? Well, as we became an industrialized society, there was a lot of pollution going on in the world, and this was a concern to folks back in the day, 50 years ago, and today. So, what are we looking at here? Does anyone have an idea? This right here are rivers being polluted by the textile mills that dye our clothing. So this is one problem that we have. We've created a lot of man-made chemicals over the years. And also, we like to burn fossil fuels, which are ancient plants stored in the ground to create energy. And we use that energy to make our modern home a wonderful place to live. So in the mid-century, the mid-20th century, we really started to appoint our homes with fun devices that make our lives easier, like refrigeration devices, vacuum cleaners, blenders, all sorts of stuff. Oh no, we wanted something good for our lives, but there were unintended consequences. That's something we deal with a lot as humans on planet Earth. But I want to put a positive spin on all of that. Celebrating Earth is about your everyday behaviors. Of course, you're not going to throw out your refrigerator or your vacuum cleaner, but you can make a lot of small efforts to make a difference, and these really add up. So, for example, if you turn off the water while you're brushing your teeth, you save at least 2 gallons of water twice, or a gallon of water twice daily. Now, who turns off the water while they brush their teeth? Now, let's do some math. And I think you have some index cards, so I hope you can write things down. When you see headings in my slideshow that are yellow, you're going to write something down. So, if you can save 2 gallons a day, how many gallons could you save per month? Okay, so if you could save 60 gallons per month, how many gallons could you save in a year just by turning the water off while you brush your teeth? Okay, now let's think about if you multiply 720 gallons per year by your age, figure out how much water you could have saved in your life so far if you turned off the water. So if you're 11, you could have saved almost 8,000 gallons. If you're 12, 8,640 gallons. And if you're 13, over 9,000 gallons. If all you do is turn off the faucet. So let's think about the whole population of Colorado. There are 5.8 million people in the state of Colorado, and that's just one state in one country on the planet. The water saved in one day if everyone turned off the water in Colorado while they were brushing their teeth is 11.6 million gallons per day. And if we measure this over 20 years across the Colorado population, we could save 84 trillion gallons of water saved. Oh my gosh! Did you realize such a simple thing that you could do to change or to make a small change in your life could have such a huge impact on the planet? So let's think about where are we on the planet, okay? Why does all this water matter? So we're going to go on a journey, and you can do this in your classrooms or at home later. I'm just using Google Maps, but I put on the satellite layer so I can see the Earth as though it is a picture taken from outer space. So we've got the United States here in North America. We're above the equator, north of the equator. Notice we have some green areas and some really dark areas, right? And now we focus on the whole country, the United States. Colorado is right here, just west of center. And notice we've got some of that green that you see on the eastern slope and the coast, and we also have some of that brown. And we have a very diverse landscape here in Colorado. As we go down, we can see even closer. As you know, your school and neighborhood is right next to the mountains, right here near Denver. And we keep going in, we can see this even more, right? We can see this very defined line. And here on the left, where it's all green, those are the mountains. And where it's brown here, this is the grassland, right? And that's where your school is. So here in Ken Carroll Valley, we are part of the South Platte watershed. And you can see here is Chatfield Reservoir. You might have gone there. And this big orange part that's kind of urban, that's right around where we are. And you are right in here, right against that green we can see, and the brown, which is the grasslands or the rangelands. All right, now here's another picture. I took this picture on a plane. Have you ever flown over Colorado? Can raise your hands. If you fly over Colorado, you see the Great Rocky Mountains. And what we see is that at the tops of the mountains, there's no vegetation, but there's often a lot of snow and almost all throughout the year. And then we go down in elevation on either side of this image, and we see the forests, right? And the subalpine and the montane landscape. And then look, you see that green and brown transition again, and that's the transition between the forest and the grasslands, and you live right there. So here we are again in Colorado. So where are we in the world? We're at the top of the watershed, the top of America. The highest peaks in the contiguous US are right here in the state of Colorado. Those are our 14ers. And we call this the Continental Divide. Are you familiar with the Continental Divide? All right, so here we are, right? And as we think about Colorado laying on the map, when we look up to the top, that's the north. And when we look to the right side, that's the east. And when we look to the south, that is at the bottom of our picture and the west on the left. I like to use this little mnemonic device to help me remember northeast, southwest. Never eat soggy wheat. All right, so based on our exploration of the map, do you think we're on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains or the western slope? Remember, we're right here at the edge of the grasslands in the forest. So we are on the eastern slope. And that means that all of the water in Ken Carroll Valley goes to one ocean. To which ocean does our water go? The Atlantic Ocean. Over here on the western side, we have the Pacific Ocean. Our South Platte River water doesn't go straight to the Atlantic Ocean. It goes into one of the largest rivers in the United States. Do you know what river that is? It's the Mississippi River. So here's our watershed. It leaves Colorado at the border of Nebraska, and it continues on, and it goes down through many states towards the Gulf of Mexico, which is part of the Atlantic Ocean. So how many states are downstream of the Ken Carroll Valley and the South Platte River? There are 8 states that are downstream of your Ken Carroll Valley. That means that we are the water protectors for a huge part of our country. Round of applause. Your valley is protecting our water, ecosystem, and heritage. And here's how. So let's think about who came before, because we weren't the first people to live here in Ken Carroll Valley. The first folks to live here were the Utes and Chief Colorado. We're not going to watch this video right now, but you might be able to watch it in your classroom later. To the Ute people, there were many native plants that were important to their culture and survival, and they're right here in our valley. One of them is sand ricegrass, and from these grains, our native peoples would grind flour. And then we also had sunflowers, and you can also grind the sunflower seeds or prepare them for later consumption. Seeds really store well, so they're good when you're traveling across the plains following the buffalo. Wild currants and other berries were really important to our native peoples, and they were also represented a kind of food source that would travel, right? You could carry berries with you. As with pine nuts, so inside of these pinyon trees, which you have around your landscape, are pine nuts, which you might have eaten in pesto. Have you ever eaten pesto? Well, these pine nuts were a very important food source to our native peoples. Also, we have wild onions. We have pinyon or ponderosa pine. From the bark of ponderosa pine, native peoples would make medicines that would help to protect them from infection and reduce inflammation. And also the Utes consumed they were omnivores. They also consumed grasshoppers for a protein source, wild rabbits, many wild birds. But even though they were enjoying the landscape, they survived in a sustainable coexistence with this landscape. So take the moment to write down 3 wild foods used by the Ute people. So we know it's possible to protect the environment, but how can we actually do it? We can turn the water off when we're brushing our teeth, but there's lots of other things we can do. So let's think back to our great landscape, right? We're all the way up here by Denver at what's called the headwaters. We're at the top of the watershed. So our ability to protect the water here really has an effect for millions of Americans and millions of animals and plants along the way. Now, before we got here, our landscape looked something like this. There were large grazers, and they were consuming the landscape and moving nomadically. And the Ute Indians also behaved in that way. But this great grassland is one of the most precious resources we have on the planet. Your valley is protecting our water, ecosystems, and heritage. And here's how. So we remind ourselves that we're here at Bradford and we're in Colorado and we're right at the edge of the high mountains, the forests, and then we see that there's this great grassland. And all to the east, all the way to the Mississippi River, which is right here on this jaggedy border between Arkansas and Mississippi. And beyond, we have a great grassland resource. And you are right at the beginning of that resource. What is the biggest carbon sink on the planet? You might have heard in your classrooms about tropical rainforests, but in fact, your backyard, the great grassland, is the largest carbon sink on the planet. So, yay, we are the water protectors and the carbon protectors of our country. Round of applause. So let's go back to the beginning of the talk. Remember these pictures? This right here is a carbon source. We love to make clothes and then we drive the materials or transport the materials across the planet for production and dyeing, and then we bring the materials to other places in the world to sell them. And did you know that when I was in high school, the average person bought 7 articles of clothing a year? How many articles of clothing do you think people buy today? On average, Americans buy 45 articles of clothing every year. So one way you can help with the environment is to shop at a thrift store. Or just love the clothes you love. You don't always need to get new clothes. Okay, then we're thinking back also. Remember, we looked at these pictures. All the things that make our lives great, that make it easy. Our cars and the machines in our houses, like our TV and our vacuum cleaners and our refrigerators. They are also all carbon sources. We're taking those ancient plants that we call fossil fuels and ancient animals, and we are burning them. And to do that is to create energy, but it also puts carbon into the atmosphere. So when you think about the carbon sources, which largely come from the way we live our lives, and the carbon sinks, which are this beautiful valley that we live in, we reach the carbon balance. The more carbon that's in the ground, the cooler the planet is, and the more carbon that's in the atmosphere, the hotter the planet is. So, as we wrap up our conversation, let us think about how we can make a difference on this landscape. Protect the carbon sink. This is the greatest climate change impact that you can make. Protect this beautiful environment that you live in. Save resources and protect your wild landscape. Turn the water off while you brush your teeth. Try not to go dirt biking off trail. Plant native plants, right? Go home and tell your parents to plant native plants because they'll support all the wildlife, including the pollinators that are right here living with us, whether we realize it or not. We want to save water because the grassland, not only does it hold a bunch of carbon, it's like a great sponge and it cleans the water. So the more water we can protect at the headwaters of this great watershed system that is the Mississippi River, the better for millions of Americans and millions of animals. And finally, just try to stay on the trail, right? The more you can protect that landscape, the better. Now, one final thought. What does it mean to be a carbon sink, right? Depending on where you are in your learning, you might know about carbon, an atom. That's an element in the periodic table. It is central to life, and it's at the middle of almost all living organisms. And when I say that the grassland is a great carbon sink, all of the grass and the organisms in the soil represent storage, climate storage, and that's how we can really celebrate Earth Day by protecting our grasslands. All right, it's time for a quiz. When was the first Earth Day? And you can raise your hands if you know the answer. You can talk to your neighbors. All right, how can you celebrate Earth Day? And where are we in the world exactly? Maybe you can name the river, maybe you can name the town, maybe you can name the state. And are we on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains or the western slope of the Rocky Mountains? And that matters because that tells us which ocean our river water goes to. And before it gets to the ocean, where does our South Platte River flow? Into what major river? How many streams are downstream? How many states are downstream of us? How many people rely on the water in our environment to live? And what are three wild foods that were used by the Ute people who lived here before us? Is the grassland a carbon sink or a carbon source? Is your modern way of life a carbon source or a carbon sink? And finally, what are three ways that you can protect the earth? Well, thank you for joining me in this conversation today. I hope to see you again someday in the future and have a happy Earth Day.